Hello, this is Kurt Frankum, and many of you know me as the host of the Leading Saints podcast. But Leading Saints isn't just a podcast. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we strive to create quality leadership content for Latter-day Saints in order to help them be better prepared to lead. With this mission comes a lot of expense, and we need additional help to continue our efforts in the coming year. In order to exchange value for value, we have created the Core Leader community. To become a core leader, all you have to do is become a subscribing donor, which might be a monthly recurring donation or even a quarterly or yearly donation. For those who become a core leader through a subscription donation, you have access to our core leader library, which includes additional recorded interviews not available to the general audience, access to all virtual summits, discounts on products and conferences, and access to a private Corecast feed where you will hear additional leadership thought and behind-the-scenes happenings. We are a community of leaders making this happen, and we need you a part of this mission. Text the word LEAD to 474747 in order to become a core leader today, or visit leadingsaints.org/donate. Hi, my name's Kurt, and I host a podcast called Leading Saints. And what are the chances that you're actually listening to that podcast right now? Well, you are. This is the Leading Saints podcast. I'm Kurt Frankum, and I welcome you back. For the many listeners who subscribe, thank you for subscribing. If you're new to Leading Saints, that's all right. Hey, we're just glad you're here. Sometimes it takes people longer than others, but that doesn't say anything about you as an individual. We love you, and you've landed in the right place. So this is a podcast where we talk all things leadership in the context of being a Latter-day Saint, because our mission as a 501c3 nonprofit is to help Latter-day Saints be better prepared to lead. And this is one way we do it. And this is another phenomenal episode where I interview John Bytheway. Now, if that name doesn't sound familiar, you usually either joined the church in the last month or you haven't walked into a desert book ever. So John Bytheway is a famous author that has written countless books. Many I've read and enjoyed, and he does a lot of content and writing for youth and does firesides and EFYs and Education Week at BYU. I mean, there's so many places and venues that he's been that I'm sure many of you are familiar with him. But if you're not, I'm so glad that I get the chance to introduce you to John Bytheway. It was fun to talk with him in this interview because we talk a little bit outside the context we generally hear him, right? It was typically in a fireside where he's teaching great gospel principles, but we talk about his time as a bishop. It was a few years ago when he was released as a bishop, and some of his perspectives and thoughts are so valuable and also so practical that many leaders, whether you're a bishop or not or serving elsewhere, many leaders can benefit so much from John's perspective that you're about to hear. Oh, and also his perspective just as far as understanding youth, teaching youth, connecting with youth. This is definitely an episode to share with the youth leaders in your ward. So here's my interview with John Bytheway. Today, I have with me John Bytheway. How are you, John?
Good. How are you?
Very good. Now, I remember years ago you coming to my early morning seminary devotional. And so if anybody's listening who doesn't recognize the name John Bytheway, you probably haven't been a youth in the last 30 years, maybe. Has it been that long that you've been at this?
Yeah, probably. I have kids that come up to me, hey, my mom, dad saw you at EFY or whatever. And so I always, oh yeah, I guess I'm getting old.
Nice. Well, time flies when you're having fun, right? And it seems like you're having fun most of the time doing this stuff.
Right, too. Sure. Yeah.
That's awesome. So if individuals maybe aren't as familiar with you, what do you tell people when they say, what do you do for work?
I've been a teacher since 96. I taught Book of Mormon at, some religion courses at BYU Provo starting in 96. And then in about 2005, I found I was commuting down to Provo because my wife and I live in Salt Lake. So I thought I'll just teach down at the BYU Salt Lake Center. So I've been teaching part-time as a part-time religion instructor. The best way to say it is a part-time instructor in religious education, because
Okay.
If you say part-time, that doesn't sound very good. So been teaching Book of Mormon, a little bit of New Testament, just part-time instructor. I don't have a PhD, so I'm just part-time. So I tell people I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. But for the most part, I've just been a teacher.
That's right. That's great. So you're a part-time instructor, but you strive to live your religion full-time. Is that what we're clarifying?
Yeah. Yeah. Part-time religion doesn't sound right. So
That's great. And it seems like, and you came, I was in a stake presidency in South Salt Lake a couple of years ago, and you came and spoke to our youth groups there. So you do a lot of speaking and firesides and that type of thing as you have time. Is that right?
Sure. Yeah. And just go where I'm invited. I always check with the presiding authority and what do you want me to do? And here's what I'm planning on doing. Is that okay? And you have the last word, and try to be really respectful of that.
Yeah.
I was a bishop a few years ago. Now I'm back on the high council in my stake. So,
oh, that's great. Well, awesome. So, I mean, you've written stacks of books. I mean, so many books I can't really remember all the titles. But do you seem to always be working on some type of book project? Is that how the last few decades have gone for you?
Yeah, I guess that's fair to say. I really like to read, and I find myself putting tons of sticky notes in books and look at this quote, look at this idea, and there's usually things I'll share with my class, and a number of the books I've written kind of have come out of things I've taught in the classroom and gotten excited about, and just have enjoyed. I never know if they're going to get published or not, and that's okay. I just enjoy the process a lot.
Yeah. And I was sort of curious about that process, and it takes my mind to, I talk with Brad Wilcox, and he sometimes approaches Desert Book with a book idea, and they say, well, that's nice, but how about you write this book, and this is what you could do, right? So sometimes do you find that you just have to write about what you're passionate about, and if it gets published, it gets published. If not, it doesn't? Yeah,
sometimes. I think that there was one time when Desert Book said, what do you want to write about next? And I said, well, really? Well, I want to write a book about golf. And I was astonished that they said, okay. And so I did.
Oh, wow.
And they liked that one. So I wrote another one just on kind of sports in general, mostly baseball, football, basketball, and just life lessons from sports. And then they said, write one about fishing. So I did. And so, but usually it's something that's on my mind or that's maybe collectively on everyone's mind. I mean, we're all amateurs in the church and trying to understand the scriptures. We're a relatively new church, and so it's been fun to write about the Book of Mormon a lot and to read and research. And so that's, I'd say probably though most of the time they're saying, do you have any ideas about this, or could you write about this? But
yeah, that's great. So you mentioned, obviously, this podcast is focused on leadership, being called Leading Saints. And you've had an opportunity to serve as bishop, and I'm sure in various other capacities, some official and some maybe not so official with leadership. What do you remember about that experience as far as being called as bishop? Was it the typical scenario, the guy's at his 5-year mark and there's some shuffling happen and your phone rings?
Well, yeah, kind of. I kind of got some forewarning from somebody, from one of the former bishops, and from the former bishop, and kind of dropped some hints that, and I had been an executive secretary and things like that. So I kind of had been accustomed to kind of what they do and things like that. It would never be something I aspired to. When they called me, I had 6 children from 11 years old down to 2. In fact, as I thought about it, I had more children at home than anybody else in the ward. And yet they called me. So I was a little bit, are you sure? And are you crazy? And are you trying to test my marriage? And so I guess like with all of us, it's a struggle to know, did this come from the Lord, or was this just an idea you had?
Yeah. Yeah, because there's still a way we can get out of it. Nothing's official yet, right? That's
yeah.
Great. So thinking back, to that, first week as a bishop, now with the blessing of hindsight, if you're going back to day one, is there any strong leadership principle or habit or tactic or anything, any piece of advice that you give yourself on day one after living through those years of being a bishop?
Boy, there's so many things that come to mind, and everybody's different. As far as I've had 2 brother-in-law, however you say that have been bishops in very different parts of, shall we say, parts of the vineyard, whatever. And they had different challenges. I think some of the best advice that I got was to say, I'll get back to you on that.
Yeah.
And because of my particular place and where I live, and I had, before I even sat in the chair, I had people in my office asking me for money for support.
Mm.
That was a shocker. I didn't know that would happen, and I didn't know it would happen so quickly. And as I knew we would be talking about this, I thought of one of the best things I ever did was just go to lunch with a couple of my friends who are also bishops. And in addition to just being a little same boat therapy,
yeah,
it was just great to hear, oh man, you deal with that and you deal with that. And of course we were very careful with confidentiality if anybody's worried about that. But it was just nice to know, hey, they're dealing with this too. And I think one of the best things that I ever heard, and I wanted to share this because I thought if there's other bishops who are also have significant welfare challenges in their ward, this might be helpful. But one of the best things that I heard was from a former bishop of mine who's now serving as a mission president. But he said he would get out a yellow pad and kind of make 3 columns when he sat down with people. And well, let me back up. First, he would just say, what do you need? What did you come in for? What do you need? Just write down everything. And without saying anything about, well, we can or we can't do that or whatever, just what do you need? And put it all down. And then he would make the 3 columns and say, okay, what do we want the church to do? What do we want the Lord to do? And what do you need to do?
I love that.
And that was so practical. I think I read the church's booklet, Providing in the Lord's Way, about 10 times. But this was a little bit more specific. The principles and the doctrines were there in Providing the Lord's Way. But that very practical idea of, okay, this is what you need. Now, what do you think you need to do for that? What do you think the church needs to do for that? Or me, the bishop, what do you want to do? What can you do to help make that happen? And be very prayerful about it with them was the advice I got. And that was a wonderful piece of advice because I found that sometimes, not all the time, I was dealing with a mentality that was just go ask the church, they'll give you everything. And or they have money, things like that. And that's I'm sorry, that's probably at the worst end of it. But that's what I was dealing with before I was there for a week.
Yeah. I know the feeling for sure.
I was like, wow, really? And so I studied that booklet. But when I got that advice, I think that in 10 minutes taught me more on the practical side of what were the actual words to use when someone approaches you and is asking for assistance. And there are certain things the booklet said that were great, like commodities before cash. And we support life, but not lifestyle. Like, don't ask me to make your boat payment, or don't ask me to pay for your Netflix or something like that. And just some of those principles were very helpful. But the actual idea saying, what are you going to do to help solve this problem, which may be an ongoing problem, put people in the mindset that was much better of, I felt like as a bishop sometimes, and I'm speaking only of welfare issues now, people wanted to hand me their problem.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I would hand it right back and say, wow, what are you going to do? Or what do you need the church to do? Or what do we need the Lord to do in this case? And really kind of work on it together in the spirit of brotherhood if I could get there. There were some people that didn't like that, what do I have to do, and would just leave. But they had just found on the internet, go ask your bishop, he'll pay for stuff. And I feel like I'm casting at this a little negatively, but this was the hardest thing I dealt with at first. So that's why I'm talking about it first.
Yeah.
The hardest thing I dealt with was, how do I do this? I don't even know what I'm supposed to do. And I felt like it would have been nice to have a little more training perhaps, but I loved that idea of the 3 columns, and that helped me a lot.
Yeah, I love that. And you talk about this mentality that they, because I remember as a bishop, individuals walking in, and I was in, what's considered an inner city ward where there's, people come out of nowhere. I've never even seen you, and you're asking me for money, right? And they're in this state of mind, or this mentality is very transactional. I come in here, you write me a check, and then I leave, right? And that's how I've heard this goes. And so shifting that to suddenly, with the columns, it shifts into this, I'm sort of like your mentor, and we're going to work through this together, and let's figure out what the problem is so that we can figure out together how we can solve this problem, right?
Yeah. And I never said it out loud, but I had the words come into my head once. I'm your bishop, not your banker. And I felt like my idea is helping you with your spiritual well-being first. And of course, all of life goes together, but let's talk about getting your spiritual act together first. And some kind of didn't expect that, but I see that in the war chapters in the Book of Mormon. Captain Moroni never put religion on the back burner. It was the front burner. It's the word of God be declared. And now we'll make swords and we'll make fortifications and we'll make, towers. But it was always, we got to get our spiritual act together was the first thing, not, well, we got to figure out how to eat and then we'll solve this thing later.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I'm just envisioning we need to get some hats embroidered that says I'm the bishop, not the banker. And then you could just put it on and then say, hey, how can I help you? This. All right. Bad idea.
Probably.
Cool. So any other, as far as welfare goes, because I think this is one, like you said, like this, you almost crave a little training, but there's so much diversity in different wards and things. We don't really know what that training would look like. But any other perspective or thought you've had as far as welfare is concerned that you didn't mention?
Yeah, one of the things that I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like there's been an emphasis in the church to push more things to the ward council.
Sure.
And I felt like, and in council with my stake president, maybe this council was just for me, but that worthiness issues, those are all yours, Bishop. But welfare, you can involve the ward council. How can we help this family? And then you've got more on your team and you don't feel like you're doing it alone. And at one point, I called a couple to be kind of welfare coordinators. And they would go through the chart with me. What is it that you need? What do you need the Lord to do? What do you need the church to do? What are you going to do? And then they would come to me with a recommendation. And that just put a nice level of separation there. And also, I had 2 different ears hearing it. And then, there were a number of us hearing it. And then when the ward council, when there's certain things we could share with the ward council, we could use that, the greater number of people to help figure out a way to solve the problem. And there were times when, to put it bluntly, I just had to say, and my welfare coordinator did too, you can't afford to live in Mill Creek.
Yeah.
Wow, you can't afford to live here. And everything we've talked about, you will still be having shortfall in your budget. So, and that's another thing, helping people write a budget. I mean, that was something the couple could do. And it was, some people had never written a budget. And so it was a great opportunity to teach kind of a life skill of, and then to help them to see this will be a long-term problem and the church can help you short-term here and there with things like this, but we're not a long-term solution to a budget shortfall,
Yeah.
That may sound unfeeling, but I felt like one of the most charitable things. In fact, I remember getting a call from a guy that was so excited that he found a place with lower rent and utilities, and how excited he was about that. And we were moving him closer to self-sufficiency, financial self-sufficiency, which I thought that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah. And that's such the tough dynamic that bishops have to deal with, is just because you feel like you're not being very nice when you don't solve their problem with a check sometimes, when it's like, well, you may need to move. And they look at you like, no, that's not an option I'd like to discuss. Right. And so, but you have to have those tough conversations. That's just another way to show them love. Right.
Yeah. And I just feel like sometimes the easiest thing might be to write a check, but it's not really helping. It's just kicking the can down the road where there's other problems of better job or cutting expenses or things. And I always felt like I'm trying to move you closer to self-sufficiency, to self-reliance. That's a better word. And of course, not spiritual self-reliance. We need the Lord, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Sure.
Always trying to move you closer to financial self-reliance so that you can, along with all Christians, help take care of the poor. I served my mission in the Philippines, and my mission president, who was, he was kind of doing his own perpetual education fund before the church was. And he started an organization called Enterprise Mentors to help the Filipinos, so many of whom had little businesses and in their backyards, to help them learn how have a business plan, how to get a loan. And there was even a school over there called ACE that was just developed. ACE means the Academy for Creating Enterprise. And it was a school that would qualify for these perpetual education funds. And it was so cool to hear return missionaries that I knew that were going back after their mission was a step up in their standard of living. For me, going to the Philippines was a dramatic step down.
Yeah.
Places having no hot water and taking a bucket shower. And for them, it was a step up. And then going back to nothing. And I just thought, wow, President Hinckley, that idea has helped so many of people that I know, former companions, who now know how to go into a banker with a business plan and start a business. And I get a calendar every month or every year from ACE with these success stories. And, they're out the kinks with the Perpetual Education Fund. But it's kind of exciting to see that idea of I'm going to move you closer to self-reliance. And I think we're trying to do that same thing here with welfare issues.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. So stepping out away from the welfare topic, and you mentioned just having a young family at home with a variety of ages. What advice would you give to a bishop with a young family? Any routines or tactics that really work for you and your wife to make that work so that it wasn't a strain on the marriage?
I found that I had to just tell my counselors on Tuesday nights when we met, I'm going home at 10. I don't care what we're in the middle of. I'm going home at 10. It was really hard the first year. I kind of felt like, I've made this covenant with my time and talents and everything. And I think I overdid it. And I finally had to get to the point where, you also made a covenant with your wife. And had to just say, I'm done. Somehow people will survive if I'm not here.
Yeah.
Go home and I'm going to have family prayer with my family. It took me a while to figure it out, but I finally did, I think. And my wife can say now that I found a good balance. But at first it was hard. And that was another thing that was helpful to talk to other bishops with about. But I heard that motto from somebody, and I've heard it attached to different general authorities, which is always dangerous. But the quotation was, "It takes a really good meeting to be better than no meeting at all."
Oh, yeah. I've heard Elder Ballard is, I think, typical. Who knows?
That's one that I've heard too. But when I was called in 2010, I had a flip phone, and my counselors both had smartphones. So I went and got myself a smartphone. When we started with the ward council, I started calling it virtual ward council. And I said, there's so many administration items that we could do via text all week long. And then we don't have to meet for so long and so early. And when we do meet, we can say, who needs help? Which families need our help? And focus on that instead of so much calendaring and planning. And easier said than done, but we made progress with that. We really did with using this tool of the internet and our texting to bring up things throughout the week that we could solve, so that when we were there at ward council, we could really focus on individuals, on ministry.
Yeah, I love that. First of all, I want to underscore the fact that you said, to strike that balance of, home and church and these different responsibilities, it took some time, right? It's nothing you're going to figure out on week one and magically it happened. So be patient with yourself, right?
Yeah, it was the hardest time in my time as a bishop, trying to figure out that balance and trying to figure out, okay, who's going to be mad at me today? And that I remember once I was like, I'm not finding much joy in this calling. And that's a horrible thing to say. So come visit me in the terrestrial kingdom. But
I'll be there with you.
Yeah, there was not a lot of joy. It was more like a lot of stress. And those moments came and would come, but it was kind of a real tender mercy. I got on a plane once to go speak somewhere, and it was I want to say it was a 767. So there's 2 seats and then an aisle, and then 3 seats in the middle, and then an aisle, and then 2 more seats. So a big plane.
Yeah.
And of all the people that could have sat next to me across the aisle was Robert L. Millett, who was a former dean of religious education at BYU. And I had this wonderful conversation for my memory as we were flying to Atlanta about how he did that. And he was, listen, I'm right there with you. It was hard for me. And it was just so nice to have a little same boat therapy. And so I really feel like talking to others who have struggled with that, and like you're doing with this podcast, is helpful. Just knowing somebody else deals with this too, I'm not the only one, was helpful. And I thought, wow, what are the chances I sit next to him? I think the Lord arranged that because he knew I was like, I don't really feel a lot of joy in my calling. I'm getting a pit in my stomach on Saturday night, and especially at the beginning of the month. And some people listening know exactly what I mean by that. That's when rent is due and people come telling you they're going to be evicted if you don't help them, and all sorts of.
Yeah, it's true.
So this calling is a lot different than what I thought it was,
Yeah. Yeah. And I appreciate you saying that, and just being real that, you go through these moments and sometimes they're longer than you expect, where you're just like, man, like I am just not enjoying this, even though, again, nobody signs up for it or wants to do it because it's enjoyable, but you're in the work, you're serving the Lord. You feel like, there should be great. I guess it's sort of like being a missionary, right? There's some of those long days where you're just knocking doors and nothing's happening, right?
Yeah, thank you for saying that. It was just not what I expected. It was hard. I was losing sleep. I was getting angry phone messages. I had my garage door egged one night. I think I know why, but I can't say for sure.
Yeah.
But I think connected with a tough conversation about somebody and money. And yet, just like you, I thought, hey, when was the Savior's life ever easy? When was Abinadi's life ever easy? When was Joseph Smith's life ever easy? When was Nephi's life ever easy? And all of them had terribly difficult times. And comparing them, I thought, hey, this is a piece of cake compared to what some went through. And am I assuming that I shouldn't have to have any trials? Are thou greater than he thing in Liberty Jail? So
yeah,
I thought I just got to go through this.
Yeah, and I often draw the parallel with Liberty Jail. Just when we think of Liberty Jail, we think of remarkable revelations that came from that experience, but they were in there for months and months, and so most days it was just stare and look at the dirt, but there were those moments that really made it all worth it, right?
Yeah, and I have a son on a mission in Iceland right now.
Wow.
And and my daughter just got home from France 6 months ago, but I was in a fisher mission. There's a verse in Jeremiah 16:16, which says, I'll send forth fishers and they will fish them, and I'll send hunters and they will hunt them. And I've heard the comparison made between hunting and fishing, especially like New Testament fishing or Old Testament fishing, throw a net over the side. And that was the Philippines. If you weren't teaching discussions, you just weren't trying very hard, because you could always get people to listen to you. And it was a fisher mission. We had baptisms every month, and people willing to listen, and people that were humble and wonderful. And in Europe, my son Andrew said something pretty pointed to me. He said, Dad, I'm going door to door annoying people. And and he's in a different kind of a mission. And the point I'm getting to is I graduated from BYU, and you don't have to go there. Of course, that's not what I'm saying.
They rejected me 3 times, John. Thanks for bringing it up.
Yeah. I couldn't get in today, but I thought these BYU football players were writing to the missionaries who were on the football team that were out serving. And these would pop up once in a while, and I would see these, and I printed some of them out, and they were really good. And then there was a guy, he's a guy that wrote a book that was a former football player, and he said the funniest thing in one of these chapters. What's the guy's name? Shane Hunter, I think. Anyway, he said that you go to a homecoming of a missionary, and you hear these fantastic stories. And this guy said, in my mission, I had fantastic stories, but the other 700 days and 720 days were pretty hard. And I thought, yeah, that's what it was like as a bishop. I had some wonderful, great moments, but I had some very long weeks and long months, only punctuated once in a while by these wonderful, wonderful moments,
Yeah.
And I needed to know that it wasn't like a mission. Every day wasn't great. A lot of days were difficult. And the ratio of that in a hunter mission, my son is having very few great days and a whole lot of long days. And, my heart aches for him because my mission was so different.
Yeah. Yeah. And I appreciate you like drawing the parallel to those leadership roles because, there probably are some bishops who maybe they're in more of that Fisher dynamic where it's just great experience after another. But I guess the main point is like, don't let that reflect back on you as an individual, right? It's not that you can't figure it out or you're broken or whatever. It's just, it is what it is. And we get through it and we're sanctified by it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I felt like the sacrament meetings where I had a time to actually interact with people, that's where I just thought, this is where I can make a difference. And I will tell you right now, and the Lord will back me up. I'm a terrible administrator. I'm a teacher. I love ideas and doctrines, but the minutia and the administration, I was terrible at it, and I needed to hand a lot of that to my counselors. And so for me, it was trying to be about greeting people and things like that. And that I doubt that anybody has ever said about their bishop, I really love my bishop because, boy, he got his reports in on time,
Right.
My bishop really had an impact on me because of his paperwork was impressive.
Right. I mean, look at this audit report. Isn't this
just beautiful,
Yeah.
So I felt like where I could try to make a difference was in the other thing. And that brings up kind of a fun story that your listeners might enjoy. And that is that when I first got LDS tools on my phone, I don't know if everybody has, mine got removed. I don't know if it's been put back on, but I had everybody's birthday.
Yeah. And
there was a man in our ward that went to serve a mission in London as a mission president, but he used to call me on my birthday. And I thought, well, this is easy. And so at the end of the day as a bishop, I don't think there were ever more than 5 or 6. Usually there were only 1 or 2 birthdays. And I would just call people at the end of the day, usually 8:30 or 9, and say, happy birthday. I'd sing. I'd say, you want to hear the long version or the short version? Short version was, this is your birthday song. It isn't very long. And that's all I do. And we're just thinking about you. We're so glad you're in our ward. We love you so much. And just thinking about, I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful celebration, and see you later. And I can't believe the mileage I got out of that.
Yeah.
And after doing it for a year or 2, people were waiting for the call. And it was so dumb. It was so simple. But, we were hoping you would call, Bishop. How are you? And I also, it dawned on me that with the rank and file, your average member of the church, your mainstream faithful member, you don't see them that much. You see them at tithing settlement.
Yeah.
And people with problems, you see a lot more, and that's fine. But I found this was a way to connect with people just on their birthday that was so simple that took almost no time. But I was amazed at what that meant to people. I'm still amazed at it,
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really just those little routines that you can find. It doesn't have to be a birthday call. Maybe you can start with that, but just being consistent with it. And because you can be so consumed by the people setting appointments, right, on your schedule that you feel like there must be only 10 people in my ward because I only meet with 10 people over and over again, and so reaching out to the rank and file is huge. You go a long way.
The 80-20 rule. And my time with 20% of the people, or sometimes 90-10 or whatever. So that's exactly right. And I thought this is a way that the mainstream member that can feel like the bishop remembered me today, boy, and I was amazed with what an impact such a simple thing had. So
yeah.
That may be helpful to some out there that are looking for some more joy and impact in their calling.
Yeah. So we're short on time a little bit here, but I want to make sure we touched on just your experience and perspective teaching and working with youth. Obviously, that's becoming more and more emphasized, especially for bishops, is working with youth. And you've had decades teaching, even back when I was in seminary. And I would imagine that, and maybe I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but teaching me as a seminary student in high school is maybe different than when you present to kids now. And any advice you'd have on leaders that are striving to connect and teach youth more effectively?
I am often complimented on this great ability to work with youth, and I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I have a sense of humor. That's about it,
Yeah.
And struggle. Just like it's one thing to do a fireside that you've got planned and prepared and your PowerPoint's ready. And it's quite another thing to teach a Sunday school class and to have a set curriculum that you need to go through. And now the kids are so distracted. They might be on their gospel library app and they might not, you know. And I feel like right after I was bishop, I went to teaching Sunday school with my wife, with the teenagers. And it was just as challenging for me as it is for anybody to try to get through things. And I would go back to some of the simplest ideas of people don't, and it's been said a billion times, but people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, type of a thing. I also think when you're in a leadership position, if you can help to put people in place with the youth who are great examples. Somebody told me something once that I just think is so true, that helped me a lot. As young people govern their lives more by example than by principle. You're not generally going to hear a 15-year-old say, well, I know all my friends are doing it, but it's the principle of the thing that bothers me, Mom, right? You're more often going to hear them say, all my friends are doing this. And an older person is not going to come to you, middle-aged person, and say, well, Brother Jones gets away with it, why can't I?
Yeah.
Our lives more by. And so with young people, I found that if I wanted to teach a principle, I could find an example in the scriptures or a real live human and try to eliminate the you should be like this. But it was, here's this person's story, look what they did, isn't that amazing? And in their own heart and mind, they will supply the I should be that way. That's been my philosophy with teenagers. Yeah. Find a example, a great story. Wow, look at what they did, and we can all admire it. And we'll get our own prompting too. Wow, that I really like that. I should be that way. But when and it's particularly hard in a ward setting. If I go to do a fireside at your stake, the kids know that I don't know them personally. They will listen to me differently than if it's their bishop saying, you need to do this because he knows, or my parents talk to him. And I think this is one of the magic things about EFY that works so well, is that they would evaluate what they were hearing differently because they didn't think that mom or dad put them up to it.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Do you know what I mean? And I can go to a fireside and I can say things that mom and dad and bishops have been saying forever, but they will listen differently because, and so that's why I want my kids to go to firesides that are not given by me. You've probably heard the old saying, an expert is anybody from out of town.
Yeah.
Someone else says it, I'll listen differently than if it's, my bishop's always hammering me about that, or my leaders are always saying that to me. Anyway.
Yeah, that's powerful. And I definitely see that in your style of teaching, as far as that, giving them examples is, it doesn't have to be necessarily people in their life or in the neighborhood or, real life people that are alive today, but you do that a lot with the, scriptural prophets, and people say, check out Moroni, look at the example he was and what he did, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then we can identify those traits, and, that's one of the things that I try to do. In fact, I wrote a book years ago. You can find all my books at the Deseret Industries, but I wrote a book called How to Be an Ordinary Teenager. And one of the reasons it worked so well is, on one side, I had extraordinary or ordinary teens do this, extraordinary teens do this. And never once does it say you should. But it's always, here's what an ordinary teenager is like, but an extraordinary teenager does this. And it never says, and you ought to also. It just kind of lays it out. And then you can look and say, I want to be like that. And I think taking the you should out of it helps with teenagers. But there's one more thing that I was thinking about I wanted to leave with you, if you have time.
Yeah. I
think most of the church is familiar with Stephen Covey, the author of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, he wrote another book called The 6 Events of the Restoration. And it was one of those things that I marveled, how did he see that in there? But there it is. And his thesis for this book was that not only were the events of the restoration important, but the order in which they came is a formula for solving life's problems. The first vision answered the question, who is God and who am I? Joseph, this is my beloved, he called him by name. In one of the accounts of the first vision, Joseph Smith says, my soul was filled with love. The next event was the coming forth of the Book of Mormon. Moroni shows up, right? And that answered the question, whose am I? I am Christ's. He has suffered for me. He has taken my sins upon himself. Whose am I? I am Christ's. The next event was the restoration of the priesthood, which answers the question, how do I receive Christ? How do I get back to God? And the fourth event was the restoration of the church. Where do I go to receive Christ? The ordinances are there in the church because that's where the priesthood exists. And we have kind of more in common with our Catholic friends on that one, that there needs to be a church, a place to go to get the ordinances. Where some churches would say ordinances, that's nice, but that's not necessary. Anyway, and then there's a couple more. What work do I do? Well, that's the restoration of the keys of salvation for the living and the dead. That's gathering Israel. And why? What's it all about? That's the temple. We're trying to get people to the temple. That's why we gather Israel. So let me just share this paragraph of Brother Covey's that brings it focus. He said, in bringing the world out of a state of apostasy, God gave us a perfect pattern to use in working with our family members and other people. How did he do it? Notice he revealed light and knowledge in a particular order. First, he dealt with identity and relationships. Okay, so there's your first vision. Then concepts, that is the gospel. Then structure or organization, that is the ordinances and the church. Finally, actions and behavior. That's very important. If we want to help our children or other people change their behavior, we begin by improving the quality of our relationships with them. And we introduce new ideas before we introduce new expectations and controls. In other words, we help them see the world differently. When a person's paradigm changes, everything else changes with it. So that's from the 6 events, the restoration model for solving life's problems, page 224 and 225. But what I loved about that, I had a kid come into my class once when my wife and I were Sunday school teachers. This was a long time ago, right after I got married, with the mohawk and pierced earrings and everything. Now, here's an easy question. Should I hand him For the Strength of Youth and have him look up dress and grooming?
Probably not.
That's lesson 4 or 5 or 6. That is so far down the list. And Brother Covey taught me, you go right back to lesson 1. There is a God, and he is real, and he loves you. And I stayed on that point for weeks when that kid was in my class. And we never cracked For the Strength of Youth and looked at dress and grooming. And a lot of times we do that. I'm sorry to say, I think I messed up once going, this was before I was bishop, but we all put on our church uniforms and went knocking on doors to try to fix our records. And we had some doors slammed in our face like we were on a mission. And it was like, look what you just did, John. You showed up with lesson 4. Hey, come to church. And you should have gone back to lesson 1. I'm your neighbor. God is real. He loves you. How's your family? Clayton Christensen that just passed away. His whole deal was in a standard of living area like ours, you don't go out to people and say, you need the church. You say, we need you.
Yeah.
Come and speak to our youth about this. Come and help us with this. We need you. I thought that was a brilliant thing. So I'm not very smart, but I know people who are.
That's why we read books, right? Of all these smart people. So
exactly. Brother Covey nailed that. Start with identity and relationships. And the church is way down at lesson 4.
Yeah.
And when I think you kind of alluded to, I wrote a book about Moroni. Well, I look at those chapters I wrote. He didn't get to the church until Moroni 6. Before that, it was the Holy Ghost. It was the Savior. It was the priesthood. He didn't get to how we run the church until Moroni 6.
Yeah.
Followed a rough similar order that Brother Covey did, I think so.
Yeah, I would say, just on kind of a side note with Brother Covey, that you think his secular books are good. Check out many of the books he wrote about the gospel. I mean, the other one I read is The Divine Center, like completely changed a lot of my perspectives on life and leadership. So good stuff. So John, I really appreciate this as we wrap up. I got one more question for you, but if people do want to find your books other than going to Deseret Industries, I hear there's another Deseret bookstore that maybe you could send them to. Or if people want to follow you or get connected, anywhere that you would send them.
Well, yeah, the DI, Amazon's good. I'll tell you a funny story. I found one of my books at DI that was almost brand new. I opened it up, and it had been assigned to a member of my ward. So I bought it for $1. I took it home. I showed my wife, and she said, "Let's give it to him again."
That's great. At least drive maybe out of the county and go to a Deseret Industry before you donate it, right?
Yeah, I know. Go to a different DI, not the one that I stop at once in a while. But awesome. Usually I'm looking for books because I love books. But I've gotten connected with Meg Johnson and Hank Smith lately, and they might be fun to interview too for you.
Yeah, I've interviewed Hank, but not Meg. So
yeah, but we started a little group together, and we call it Jumping Turtle. It's ourturtlehouse.com, and it kind of requires an explanation. Meg Johnson was hiking in southern Utah, and she accidentally jumped off a rock called Turtle Rock and became a quadriplegic. And her story is just incredible. In fact, there's a little movie called Falling Up, which anybody can find on YouTube, the Meg Johnson story, Falling Up. And just show it to your ward council. It's crazy. It's only about, 10 minutes. So we started this company, and we connected it with turtles because that was a pivotal event in Meg's life. So ourturtlehouse.com, and we started to put a lot of talks and things on their resources. But yeah, just, Deseret books, whatever.
That's great. Well, the last question I have for you is, as you look back, at your time serving as a bishop, looking back on that time, being a leader, how did that help you be a better follower of Jesus Christ?
Well, gosh, so many things come to mind. Right at first, I have so much compassion for the leaders and respect for them. And after a few months, I thought I will never question a bishop's decisions again, because I just knew that there's so much more going into things than I knew. And so many other families and other things that are kept quiet, that are confidential, that you're working with. And I thought, you just don't know that. So that changed my attitude toward leaders. Other than that, really, back to Brother Covey, focusing on loving people and relationships. And we can do, that has to be there before we try to do the other things. And one of the things that I did as a bishop, we had a motto my first year was onward and upward. And I remembered the President Kimball statement that we paused on some plateaus long enough. We need to work onward and upward. And we called it Onward and Upward Together to emphasize missionary work. And then another thing that we did another year was, what is your next step? Because for some people, their next step might be coming to the church. Their next step might be, I go to church, but I don't say my prayers. Their next step might be, I need a temple recommend. Their next step might be, I have a recommend, but I don't go. So that's a very individual thing. Get your own personal revelation about what the next step the Lord wants you to take to come closer to Him. And I don't know, I felt like that was helpful for us.
And that concludes my interview with John Bytheway. Bless his heart, he's been someone I've looked towards as an example in my own life. Even back when I was a junior and senior in high school, and he came to speak at our seminary, and just a phenomenal talent that he has of teaching, connecting, knowing the scriptures, and he would be worth spending some more time with. And and if you haven't read some Stephen Covey books, as far as like church books, that may be something to put on your reading list, because there are some phenomenal ones. I actually wrote down the one that he mentioned, the 6 Events of the Restoration. One of my favorite books is The Divine Center that you got to check out. But anyways, fantastic interview with John Bytheway. I want to give a shout out to Michael Brinton, who actually helped arrange this interview. I think he's a family member of Brother Bytheway. So if there's anybody else who has a connection, a contact, somebody, whether they're, somewhat famous or not, or whether they speak around the world or not, just an interesting perspective on leadership that you think we should reach out to, go to leadingsaints.org/contact and let us know. Now, obviously that list is filling up. We can't reach everybody, but we want to find those dynamic leaders, whether they look like that dynamic leader or claim to be. Most dynamic leaders think they have nothing to share until we get a hold of them. And but I'd love to hear from us. So go to leadingsaints.org/contact, let us know, and we'd love to reach out and consider them for an interview. And remember, text the word LEAD to 474747 and join the core leader community today.
It came as a result of the position of leadership which was imposed upon us by the God of heaven, who brought forth a restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And when the declaration was made concerning the only true and living church upon the face of the earth, we were immediately put in a position of loneliness, the loneliness of leadership, from which we cannot shrink nor run away, and to which we must face up with boldness and courage and ability.